right, guys, welcome to the Hypnocafe podcast and magazine. I'm your host, as always, Dan Goyette, and we want to welcome you with my good buddy Frank T Rex to this great episode. You know what? Our Facebook has stopped working, so that's weird. That's okay. We're still on YouTube, so we're just going to keep going. So, just a few minutes. I want to talk quick and briefly before I bring our guests on about the spring issue of Hypno Cafe magazine. And you're going to see when it comes that there's nothing on the back. Usually there's something on the back. That's just because Dazzle Printing has upgraded their software that they're using. And I was a little concerned with that they had changed it, but it actually came out all right. So as they evolve, we're going to evolve. That means that we've got a whole extra page to check with for advertising and articles. We just have more room now. So today's episode and show is all about event coordination. And I have brought on a lot of great guests that are experts, much more than I am, for the event coordination. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guests today. There's good old Grant. So Jim Kellner, Grant Saunders, and I need to change that out. And our amazing mystery guest, Anthony Gitch, who, you know what? Yeah, I got his name right. You know, yeah. I feel really good about that.
Easily confused.
I know. I remember, I think I did it once. I went with another name, and we won't say it, but it wasn't right. To say the least. Yeah, it's something you find in computers, and I'm just like, no. So, yeah, today we're talking about event coordination and getting those events out there. I had a lot of questions asked of me lately about events and how to coordinate them and why we do them and what's going on with them. So I thought, hey, you know what? I know guys that do events, big and small. We should get on and talk about this. And I want to start with Grant Saunders because he did an event that I thought was really interesting. It wasn't I don't know if it was a big event or what have you. You held the event in Thailand, if I remember right. Or am I
we looked at putting on a retreat in Thailand, but things changed around a bit, so I ended up going solo over there. But yeah, it's as I say, it's weird to organise something in a foreign country, but then if you've got contacts in that space, it does make life a little bit easier, and you can double it up as a bit of a holiday as well.
So yeah, I try to make all my events working holidays. As a matter of fact, when I was doing stage hypnosis and Mike and I were running Firemind Productions, we pretty much just did that so we could get the tax return to go to HypnoThoughts. That was our master plan. Because I honestly thought to myself, well, who's going to hire Dan Goyette, hypnotist? I'm not making any money off this, so I'll spend a little money and I'll do that. And then all of a sudden, people hired me. So I don't know what they were thinking.
Well, a lot of it about as well is think of back in the olden days, you would contact or a booker would contact you to do the jobs that you want to do. The reality is in this day and age, the access to good marketing, graphic design and everything, create the work that you want to do. Where do you want to work? What type of work do you want to do? And then you have the opportunity to create that event yourself. And so if you want to be a speaker in Hawaii, put on an event in Hawaii and book yourself to speak on it. It's as simple as that, really.
Exactly. So we're going to be, and just to let you guys know that if people were trying to watch, we're going to be redoing this on Facebook because it stopped broadcasting, but we're on YouTube. But don't worry about it. I'll download it, put it up. You'll be able to see it on the replay. So, and make sure you put #replay. So that's something I learned from Jim and Grant. That was an interesting thing. So we want to start talking about events. So let's talk about this. I've got my online screen thing here, Grant, keeping me in the know, on the line.
Keeping your agenda going. Perfect.
Yeah, getting my agenda, keeping me from getting all over there. So one of the things they asked me is why create an event? That was the big question. Why create it? I think that sometimes when we see an event, people automatically assume, oh, well, they're just trying to make money. They're trying to bring in revenue. And that's certainly part of it. But I know that we all separately had our own reasons for creating events. And money wasn't really the big factor in that because I'm here to tell you guys, you don't make money when you first start out. I think we're looking to make. I think we're going to break even this year in Michigan, which is pretty good. So I know that my reason for starting this event was Michigan used to be quite the mecca for hypnosis, and it still is a little bit. When I got out of training in 2012, you got on Google, you got on Facebook, you got on wherever you were going to be social media, and you're looking, they were everywhere. And it's like there's an old saying in Michigan, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting one. So that was the saying, and probably not the greatest saying, but we're in Michigan, so. Yeah. But and then a few years back, about 3 or 4 years ago, I just happened to be looking. I was redoing my business name and redoing my Google page and my Bing pages, and I looked and I'm like, where'd everybody go? It's like there was like 25, 30, 40 hypnotists that were on, and then all of a sudden there were like 8 of us. So I was just like, where did everyone go? And I found out a lot of people just gave up. So Heather and I talked and said, hey, you know what? And we could talk about that later. But that was our reason for starting the conference, was to bring hypnosis and hypnotherapy back to Michigan. So I'm going to start with Jim and Anthony, because I know you guys had a huge reason for starting the Pacific Northwest. So let's talk about that for a little minute.
Anthony?
Okay.
Story?
Well, yeah, pre-COVID, I had attended the ICBCH Winter Conference. I had attended Hypnothoughts once. I had attended the NGH conference. And what I recognized was that obviously there was all of these conferences that were going on outside of the Pacific Northwest. And we are a real central hub for a lot of really incredible hypnotists and processes here in the Northwest. And I wanted, I'm a go-getter, and I wanted to bring a conference to the Northwest. And so I met Jim. I called him out of the blue one day and said, this is kind of an idea. Do you want to jump on board with me? And Jim was like, sure. Without even really knowing each other, we jumped into this. That was, like I said, pre-COVID, and I had already done a bunch of research. And Jim was actually, which is very odd, because back then he was the sane one telling me, Anthony, this is freaking outrageously expensive. What are you thinking? Because it was at the Sheraton, and it was like
it was
$7,000 for the weekend. I had these great ideas. We're going to have 10 rooms running, and all these people. We're going to have this banquet, and then I got the charge and the prices, and I was like, holy crap! We need to rethink this a bit and see if someone wants to help. And that's where Jim came into the picture, and then COVID hit. And that put us on hold for a while, but we're learning, we're growing, we're doing. But that's the reason I did it. I wanted to have something here in the Northwest and build a community. I am all about partnerships and working together like that, because I think that everybody achieves more, right? When we're able to elevate the industry as a whole, people recognize us as a more elevated industry, and they start seeking us out more. And that's what I was really trying to do, is help elevate where we are in hypnosis in Washington State, the Pacific Northwest.
And I remember, way back, I'd just come back from Hypnothoughts, and I'd gone to an NGH meeting, a National Guild of Hypnotists local meeting. And I remember talking to this one woman who was like, oh, I would love to do that, to go to Hypnothoughts, but my husband is not comfortable with me going to Vegas by myself. And so I said, and that's when I sort of said, wow, we need something here in the Northwest, because we're kind of a dead zone. There's nothing within, I think, at least 1,000 miles, right? I mean, Vegas is the nearest, place where we have anything. And so the difference between me and Anthony is when he called me, see, I had already been thinking, wow, I need to reach out to,
Selena Dorsey, I think was her name then, or is it now? I can't remember now, but because she got married, she had done HypnoBiz. I was like, I should reach out to her or maybe see if HypnoThoughts wants to do something up here. But Anthony, on the other hand, was like, hey, let's do this ourselves. And I was like, can we do that? and yes, we can.
So, and as you guys know, the Michigan conference was Heather's brainchild. I said that's how we started it, but she was like, why don't we have a conference here in Michigan? I said, well, like you, Jim. I said, well, it's a lot of work and I don't want to do that. And I don't, it's a huge undertaking. And she looked at me and said, you didn't hear me. Why don't we have a conference? She wasn't asking a question and I missed it. So yeah, it was a statement. But it was one of the great things. And I want to just touch on something real quick. I know that you guys we talked about this, Jim. If I can find it here in my cool photos as I look down here as I'm scanning. Here it is. You guys found this great venue. So
Anthony found it. Amazing.
Anthony found it. So
and it's far more affordable than you would think by looking at it, really.
We looked at some real dives and we're like, okay, we're going to go ahead and stay here.
Yeah.
I know that, like me, Jim and I had kind of talked about this earlier. When that first year came, we reached out to a bunch of venues and nobody called us back or nobody emailed us back. They didn't want anything to do with us because they were just like, well, who are you or what are you and why are you? And you guys had a similar type of experience. And I think I want to talk about that for a minute because everyone thinks it's like, oh, you put a deposit down, you get money, there it is, you get the venue, it's easily rentable and you go. And it's not, because a lot of venues are like, well, we haven't heard of you. Is this your first year, second year, third year? What are you doing? How many people are you going to have? That was the big question I got, was like from a couple of them. It's like, well, how many people are going to come? And I had to be very honest with them. And I said, well, I'll be there and Heather will be there. So I know 2 people will be there for sure. So yeah. And let's talk about that, because I know you guys had that experience as well. And what were some of the challenges that you faced on that end?
Well, I think it's the same challenge anybody who creates any kind of event is faced with, getting the word out there enough to the right people that are going to create excitement around what it is that you're hosting and you're doing. I mean, it's not easy to get people to purchase tickets 8 months ahead of time for things and to get excited about it. And Jim and I were catering this year. In fact, after this, I've got a meeting with the caterer and they're going to be asking, well, how many people are coming? And I'm like,
don't know.
Good question. What's our minimum and what's our maximum? Right. And so that is a tough thing, but you're right. At the Sheraton, when I was looking at the Sheraton the first year, they were really, we want to know how many people you're going to have, how many rooms are you going to be able to fill out, because, they had a minimum of, I had to have 35 guest rooms filled in order to get certain discounts and that sort of stuff. And we didn't do that last year. It was our first year, like I said, and we're at the Marriott, which is right across the street from that lovely building there. And we got great rates, but we're a smaller regional conference is what we're learning, and that's what we're focusing on. And so we're learning how to adapt.
So, one of the things that folks may not realize too is that they will give you a good deal on renting the space if you commit to buying enough food. That's one of the big things. And like, people will say, well, why don't you just run down to Costco and bring in some pizzas? They don't let you. You can't bring in your own food because that's where they make a lot of money. I'm guessing there's some sort of a kickback system that they've got with like Aramark or whoever their caterers are. So it really makes it challenging. And then there's the minimum. And like Anthony said, ideally everyone would buy their tickets, 6 months in advance. That's why we offer early birds, because, the more the more knowledge we have going into it, we know how many, classrooms we need to book, how much food we need to get. But unfortunately, and I've done the same thing, is most of us, we wait till the last minute. And it's really, guys, it's a pain in the ass for us, because then we're scrambling at the end. Oh my God, now we've got to add another room. Can we even add another room? Do they have that space available? And so it does make it extra challenging. And I want to say something too, Dan. I want to just give you a shout out. I remember when Anthony had first talked about it, and I was like, I didn't know you, but I knew I was coming. I'd already been accepted to the Michigan conference, so I was coming out. And I remember I was like, I don't know this guy, but this is his first event, and I wonder, he seems pretty cool. Let me reach out to him. And I remember sending you a message on Facebook. Hey, if you've got a couple of minutes to chat, I'd love to get and you were just like, dude, when you want to talk. And it was like we were on a video call, like I think the next day or something. Yeah,
for like 3 hours.
Yeah, it was just really just such a supportive and helpful guy. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, it's just I've always been, because I'm a teacher, and I guess that's just my innate personality. I get a lot of flack. I'll go to a conference and I just give away my presentations, and it's like, here you go, have it. Knowledge is not meant to be hoarded. And I do remember telling you, Jim, like, yeah, this is my first year and this is what I did. But I was like, I'm learning with you. And we're still learning. One of the things I did initially was I really went into debt that first year.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Beef and beef.
Yeah. Well, I had seen, having been going to conferences as you did, Jim and Grant and Anthony, we all go there, and I knew what I saw. It's like, oh, they have projectors and they have screens and they have whiteboards and they have this and they have that. And I knew I didn't want to pay someone else to do that, because then, it's like here in Michigan, that was so hit and miss with that type of AV. I just started buying stuff. I bought the projectors, I bought the whiteboards, I bought the microphones, and I bought speakers. I had speakers, but I bought more speakers, and I just more, and XLR cable, and we did all this stuff. And I thought, okay, but it's actually paid off in the long run, even though I still have to buy more of it. I think, what did we just buy? Oh, the new ID scanner printer thingamajigger. We just bought that. So we can make our own IDs instead of like going to a print shop and having them made. Like, I can just make them here, because we did that 1 year. I think we used the fire departments or the EMS station for the hard plastic IDs. I thought, that's really cool. This year they will not have people's pictures on them, because a couple of people are like, why is my picture on this? So, but and I think that paid off in the long run, because this year all we really have is the venue and the catering, which, again, as you guys talked about, is where they make their money. Yeah. They really get on that. And one of the things.
Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
One of the other things, I think you and Jim, or was it you and Grant that were talking about this? One of the things this year with the venue is room nights. A lot of people don't understand. We've got to fill so many room nights, or we've got to pick that up at the end. So that's why we get those great rates. That's why we negotiate those hotel rooms down to a price that's more manageable, so that we can fill those room nights. So at the end of the conference, we don't have an expense. And that's just one of the issues that comes up, is the hotel is like, well, how many rooms are you going to fill? Yeah. And so,
let me just jump in there real quick. And so if somebody is planning an event, I'll tell you that so far the Vegas hotels we've worked with, the Orleans and the Gold Coast that the Grant and I have worked on with performing hypnosis, they don't actually have that requirement, which was a relief. I was when I talked to them the first time, I was like, how many do I have to fill? And they're like, no, you don't have to, but they open up a bunch of rooms. The downside is like, if you don't book your room, though, you don't get that great rate, because they will sell out. And we did have, I remember last year, like a week before, people were messaging me, hey, are there any rooms left? No, they're all gone. You got to go pay full price now, So, but yeah, I do think we're on the hook. I do think we're on the hook down in, I think at the Marriott, I think we are on the hook.
Well, I'll tell you, One of the big things, this is anybody who's planning to do something like this, and all of us here know this. As hypnotists, we should all be aware of this, but it's about connections. It's about how you are interacting with these folks, because the people at the Marriott, they like me, right? They like me, and
Really?
so
Yeah.
they are doing extra things that will accommodate how we are working things out at the end,
Ooh, I
right?
like
I
that.
mean, and that's because I have spent time getting to know them a little bit, chatting with them, having casual conversations, telling them about what we do and why we do it, right? And so that has given us a little bit more room, where before they were offering us one price. Now we got even $15 off of that price is, right? Which is not much, but it's still something, right? And that's because of the relationships that we're creating and why we're staying at the same location each year. Because the more that we create these relationships with these venues, the better deals are going to give us, the more they trust us, and the more that they're willing to work with us on the size of our needs. But I'll tell you, $200 for an urn of coffee is what they
Oh,
charge, which is why we don't have coffee at our
right.
event.
Exactly.
It's sat
So
there at Hypno Thoughts and watch people walk into that room, fill up their coffee cup, go, oh, I don't like the way this tastes, and throw it out. And I'm like, ain't happening at my conference. Not on my dime.
Not gonna do it.
Yeah.
But there are some nice rooms at the Marriott, though. I think that's one of the
yeah,
pictures there.
Yeah,
they're
So
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
they've all got great
Um,
views, and
so that they
so I
do.
think
So go ahead.
no, I'm done.
All right. So yeah, and the Pacific Northwest, I like it because the hotel is right across the street from the conference center, and then of course I'm looking forward to that fish restaurant. But moving on to the, I think we're gonna. I gotta show it here. So I know that right after the Pacific Northwest, somebody, you know, was able to convince Jim to do a second conference.
Hypnosis works.
Exactly, which is the Performing Hypnosis Summit, right there. So, yeah,
I
and
th-
that
yeah.
you guys got a great place to do it.
I think
Yeah.
it's one of them. Anthony mentioned it earlier. It's about doing your research as well. The stage hypnosis or the performing hypnosis community at that time, especially around the COVID time, was not being serviced by anybody. There was lots of stuff for hypnotherapists out there, but a lot of stage hypnotists were lone wolves. We're on the road, we're doing our things, we're all going through the same emotional and psychological problems from not performing. And so it kind of, we stumbled upon that need, which we did through a couple of podcasts, and then we did a virtual summit. And you realize from that, oh, actually, this is getting those people together. So when we talked earlier about doing your research, I think it's, don't just put on events for the sake of putting on events. Don't look at Hypno Thoughts and go, oh, those guys are doing it, so I'm going to do it. And don't look at PNW and think, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. Make sure you know that an area, what can you add to the industry? What's not being serviced? And the Performing Hypnosis Summit really kind of fell into that unserviced area. So it was a sense of duty that we had to go forward with it. After the virtual event, it had to become an in-person event and a hybrid event as well.
Yeah, and it was great. I got to go there last year. I'm looking forward to going this year. So, but you guys have already had a twist, and there's always twists and turns with an event. And I always tell this to Heather, so she kind of gets a little upset when the venue isn't behaving as it should. It's important when it happens how we respond to it. I always say to it, well, I have an old saying, just one more thing, guys, and we're on this. Originally, you were slated to be back at the Orleans, and then somebody high up in the Orleans went, well, whoa, chill out. We're we're rebuilding this winter. So you guys moved over to the Gold Coast, which is still one of their properties.
Yeah.
But I do have to commend you guys, because that was, if the venue had come back to me and said, we're not going to be there here in Michigan, I would have been like, oh boy. But you guys just handled it so seamlessly. It was just right in there. And I'm not really jealous, but I'm jealous because it was so seamless that you
Uh,
guys handled it.
on the outside, it was seamless. You didn't see the frantic phone calls between me and Grant.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sometimes, especially in events, you're dealing with a collection of human beings, so anything can happen. And when you're early doors in an event, your leverage, your sway that you've got with the bookers isn't as strong as it could be, and so they're not gonna move as much for you as you could do. 2 or 3 years down the line, when they know that that event is worth so many thousands of dollars for them, they're going to be more accommodating. But in the early days, you've got to be flexible. And by doing so, weirdly, the universe has a way of lining stuff up as well. So what first was an annoyance now has turned into something that I actually think is going to be an upgrade. I actually think the Gold Coast is going to be a phenomenal venue for it as well.
I
Yeah,
agree. I was just
yeah.
going to say, I think actually, I'm curious. We're going to go to. We're going to. I mean, I've stayed at the Gold Coast before. One time when I didn't buy my hotel room in time for Hypno Thoughts, and I had to stay at a different venue. And I got to tell you, don't do that, guys. It sucks. Stay at the hotel. Just get your reservation soon. But we're going to go tour it and take a look. But it actually it seems better than the Orleans.
Yeah.
So I don't know why everybody has their conferences at the Orleans. Maybe it's just a habit because I'm actually excited about it. It looks nicer. It's more for adults apparently. They don't have as
The reason for that, Jim, is because there's 11 restaurants, there's bowling, there's 58 million bars. That's the reason. I'm sure it's the reason.
Gotcha. But we're also going to be
it's certainly the Gold Coast is a much nicer location,
and plus it's a little bit closer to the Strip, so we're excited about that.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the restaurants that's in the Gold Coast. I looked it up because I'm just like, hey, I wonder what kind of things they got going on in there. And yeah, it's looks really nice. I mean, I was like, oh, hey, the Ping Fang. I don't want to say Fong, but okay, that looks like what it is.
It sounds almost racist. It sounds like a racist joke.
I know. But it looks like it. I don't know. But it does. I mean, I'm looking at it and thinking, man, that's really clean and it's really great. Because the other question, and Anthony was talking about this, is getting to know your venues, doing those site visits. That's important. I mean, when we did the Island Resort Casino in Harrison, I did no less than 4 site visits. So that, they knew me. I was talking to the caterers. Because I did not want a repeat of the beef and beef. And that was something I learned. So yeah, we're up there. We're talking to the caterers. We're talking to the room guys, and I'm going to be doing the same thing. And I know that, Anthony has done that as well. How important is the site visit to you guys? I mean, to me, it's pretty important.
Yeah, it made us determine not to go to a couple places. And I mean, the original location that we had chosen, not the kind of the original location, was a smaller venue. And because of dealing with the person who was managing the facility, the events manager made us move bigger, right? And so it was one of those things that forced our hand to something a little bit more expensive, but we haven't been, I don't think, upset or harmed by where we were forced to go to. Because we really do like the venue. We were able to produce something that was a little bit higher class than just something that, was at a community sort of center, even though the community center had a big stage and all that kind of stuff that we were going to use. But, I think that it really ended up better. And I'll tell you, even when these things start, when you start one of these things, and I know that Grant and Jim will agree with me, and Dan will, you've got to ride out the storm, because there is a storm the first couple of years. Let's just be real. But by being able to stick with it and being able to adapt and to build on what it is you've done the first 2 years, it helps to create something more. Because like with Jim and I, next year we are going to be more successful. We're going to be bigger because we're expanding into a whole other region of behavioral health sciences here in Washington State, because we fall under the umbrella of behavioral health specialists. So what the conference is doing is we're getting authorized as a continuing education provider for the state of Washington Department of Health, since I'm on the advisory board for certified counselors that work under us. Now we are going to have a whole other audience coming in and building a larger community of hypnotists and helpers, where the hypnosis community is going to be more, again, it's going to be elevated up into that counselor sort of thing, because we're going to be interacting and teaching with counselors, right? And so there's always ways to adapt and to build on these things if you are open to the right opportunities and listening to the right folks. And I think that that's important to remember when you're doing something like this, is that you've got to be aware of where those doors will open. Even if there's a crack, you should always keep an eye open for it.
No, yeah. So, and that is true. Now, I want to kind of throw this out there: vision and reality. And Jim and Grant, I want to go with you guys on this one, because we all had a vision for our conferences, and we all still have a vision for our conferences. And but the vision doesn't always quite match the reality. And I know that when the summit came up, it was this great vision, and it was like, oh yeah, this is really going to be good. And then the reality started setting in, and you guys, because we were just testing stuff all the time. So, what were some of the things that kind of tested your patience on vision versus reality for that?
People.
People. Yeah. All the big things are simple. When it comes to the people, I have never overestimated the technical abilities of professionals to use Zoom more than I had during that summit. And when a lot of these, and this is it's all meant in jest, but when a lot of these people use Zoom with clients as well, I kind of assumed that box was fairly ticked. But assumption only makes an ass out of you and me, and that's definitely true on that. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say, as far as, I would say both of the conferences that I'm involved with have exceeded my expectations. Really, as far as
Stupidity
what's that?
from others. Stupidity from others. Go ahead, Jim.
For mothers, what?
Others. People not being smart.
Oh yes, it's the thing is, and it's so funny because so you put up email addresses and things like this because you're like, hey, please contact us through the email, but you're still going to get Facebook messages.
Yeah.
And I get it because it's a closer relationship, but the problem with that is that like I'm involved. I'm working with two other people here. So if you just send me a message and now I got to go say, hey, Grant, can we do this? Or hey, Anthony, this guy wants to do this. So it's a lot easier. If you're going to do that, I would appreciate, send a message to both coordinators, not just one. That makes it a lot easier. Or just send an email, because the thing is too, with Messenger, it's harder to track, but when it's in an email, we can take more action on it. But I guess my point there was, at some point though, it clicked for me because somebody said, I'm sorry to be such a bother. And I was like, you know what? This is my job. This is exactly dealing with this stuff that is an annoyance. It truly is actually your job to do when you're doing an event. So I developed a lot more patience when I did realize that.
It's even with people that you use their computers all day long. They create their stuff, whatever they're going to present. They create it all on their computer, and then they send a message. What kind of computer are you supplying for us?
Yeah. Right.
Oh yes.
Bring in your suitcase.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar question through the NATH conference. I went out there and helped. I can't think of her name right now. Wow. Linda, thank you. Thunberg. Yes. And that was one of the things, was like, are you guys going to have computers available? And just as a presenter, I'm thinking to myself, how are you a presenter and you don't have that available to yourself?
Right.
And then the big thing for me was when they got there, several of them couldn't figure out the projector. And I was like, you plug into it. That's what we do. So yeah, I mean, it is frustrating, but you do have to be patient with them, and so I've learned the same thing. So one of the big things. And I will say that vision versus reality, I want to bring this up real quick. When the first year of the Michigan Hypnosis Conference, let's see if I can do this. Everybody said, "Oh, Dan, you got to use the DeVos Center." So, which is there in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Yeah, there's a hotel there, and it's, and there's an airport. But I just looked at him and I said, that's not the vision I have. I mean, the DeVos Center has well over 40 conference rooms in it. Yeah. And first of all, I can't afford that. Second thing that they wanted to know was the DeVos Center was how many people and how many rooms and how many vendors are you going to have? So this is a picture of just one row of vendors. But just to give you guys an idea, let me hide that and bring that gone. Let me show you this. This is their vendor hall.
Boy.
Yeah, they've put fire trucks in there. I know that because we used to go there for the EMS conference. So ambulances and fire trucks got parked in that vendor hall. Like, I am not going to fill that vendor hall at all. So this was all the helpful vision that I was getting from people, and Anthony has said it best. It's like, there's always someone that knows how to run your conference. And that's another thing with the patients that you have to have, because everybody has an idea and everybody has a suggestion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I know Grant had that kind of coming at him during the summit. It's like, hey, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And, he was very, shall we say, British about the whole thing. Really,
British. He was so British.
I think one of the things that helps, and one of the things that surprised me and surpassed my expectations, is the flip side of that. People's ability to want to actually, when it's new, that they want to pitch in and get involved as well. I mean, we had some fantastic volunteers that Jim did a great job of kind of corralling and kind of keeping up there. But there was a moment when we talk about the tech stuff, there was a moment when Captain Sean Kostiak, there was an issue with some tech stuff, and the person involved in it was like, oh, I know how to sort this. I'm a tech person. And then we're doing it. And he walked in, tweaked something, turned around without even checking, turned around and then walked out, and then it just worked.
Yeah.
And that was a moment, but it kind of brought everybody together, that as well. So it's those volunteers, the people that are willing to help. And I would definitely say, find out the people that want to help you, find out their strengths and get them on board.
Yeah.
Getting them on board is the key thing, because I think when I started out, I actually was able to, con Jim into joining the Michigan Hypnotherapy Guild board to kind of help with that conference a little bit. And now he's thinking, how do you do that? Like, I called him and now I'm planning his conference. But, and he said it 1,000 times, and I agree with him. Collaboration beats competition every time.
100%.
That's such a great point, Dan, because even people like William Mitchell, Scott Sandlin of Hypnothoughts, William Mitchell, of course, of Heartland. I mean, you are, like the collaboration buddy, but I mean, even them have stepped up and, they've offered, hey, what can I do to help? If you need advice, if you need help, Scott, sat down with me at Hypnothoughts, and we chatted for, 20, 30 minutes and, talking with me about, things that were helpful. And, so it really is collaboration over competition. And I think that's where, I know stage hypnosis, especially in the past, has been like a solo thing, and it's moving more, I hope, more towards cooperation. So, and I do want to make sure I mention too what Grant said about people. So they can be a pain in the butt sometimes, but they also, they've been so patient. We're going to make mistakes. There's always going to be mistakes. And they, for the most part, they've just been so supportive and, hey, we understand, what can I do to help, that kind of stuff. So it has been even a kind of a collaborative experience with the attendees and the presenters.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's even things like this really help, because it's, we're pooling our skill sets as we're all growing and learning. We're learning stuff together. Like, I was so excited to learn, Dan, that you've got an ID card printer.
I know. Yeah.
I'm sure we could find a use for that, Dan.
I'm almost certain. So like Prince, either way, I'm all about that. And so yeah, because I thought to myself, you know what? As the years roll, if I do this 3 years, even if I get 3 years out of it, that's really it paid for itself the first
Yeah.
year. I mean, for buying identification tags and getting all the lanyards and everything like that, it pays for itself the first year because it's just right there. And then if you have like a group that you know, and then hey, can we do? Yeah, I'll print them up. I got it. And so keeps
I
everybody's.
just collect shoestrings that I find on the street all year as lanyards.
Like
It's
I think
thinking,
there's.
I'm
oh,
I'm
yeah.
I'm very frugal. Ask Jim. I'm like, Jim, no, you can't do that. Jim, you can't do that, Jim.
No, yeah,
It's that big
Heather's the
picture
same way.
thinking. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's that big picture thinking. So kind of going, you know what? I'm not gonna steal all the money in the first one. I'm not gonna make loads of. It's you kind of thinking. If you're thinking 2 or 3 years ahead, where you're like, do you know what? If I buy this piece of equipment, that's going to save me money in the long run. That's where it's at. It's what's the saying? You can shear a sheep 1,000 times, but you can only skin it once. These people that want to put on events and just rape it for as much money as they can, they're not going to find much joy in this industry. Events management and putting on events is going to
Nor are they going to find much money or success.
Exactly. You've got to think bigger picture. What are you adding to the industry? What value you're providing 2 or 3 years down the line?
Exactly. I remember telling Jim when we first spoke that I had in my head, again, we go back to vision and reality. When we started that, I envisioned 3 years down the road. Where are we at? And that first year, Gaylord was the only one that would touch us, only one that would talk to us. So yeah,
Of course.
yeah. No, and then they drilled into the bathroom door during the keynote, and well, I didn't know Heather could move that fast, but so, and then we went. I knew that we needed. It's like, okay, they started us, so we had the event. Even though it was super small, we had it. That was the biggest thing. And then I found the Island Resort Casino, which is a bigger area, and I thought I was like, okay, and I knew. I had a madness. I get it was a trudge. I get it was a pilgrimage, as we have said here. If you came to the Michigan for those first 2 years, it was a pilgrimage.
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Exactly, and I appreciate that, Jim. It was just so amazing. So yeah, but in my head, I knew that if I just get into that large venue, the places that I really needed to be, the places that ignored me that first year were going to come knocking, and they did. MGM Grand and the Motown in Detroit, and just because they knocked on my social feed, the Hollywood Casino showed up, and I'm going to take a page out of Anthony's book right here, and that's it. That is the Hollywood Casino in Greektown. That's our venue. Much like you, Anthony, I was driving down there with my cameraman for the magazine, Gerald Williams, and I thought to myself, oh man, did I make a mistake? Because when you talked about, we looked at some real dives. It was the old Greektown Casino, and I had been there for an EMS conference years ago, and there was actually a jumper that year at one of the areas. So I thought, oh boy, this is not going to go well. This is not going to be a good site visit. And we got there, and I met with the gentleman, Jonathan, and he goes, oh, no, they don't own it. It's like the Hollywood Corporation bought it, and they pumped in $40 million. And then as I'm looking around the area in Greektown, it didn't even look the same. They had completely redeveloped the entire area. So I was just like, I'm not going to say I got giddy, but there may have been a little dance. So yeah, like you, Anthony, I was prepared for, we've got to go bigger, but we did not. This was one of the things where my vision didn't meet my reality. The reality was actually better than the vision. So, and I forgot the point why I brought this up.
Dan, let me just talk about something real quick too, as far as,
Sure.
like what Anthony was talking about earlier, when Anthony was talking about the first venue that we had looked at, I'd forgotten about it. I think I had blocked that out of my mind because
yeah.
it was, I mean, it would have been fine, but it would not have been what it is now. Honestly, looking back now, it was crap based on what we've got now. And
Yeah.
so what I would say is, don't just think that you can't afford or that you don't want to. I mean, I would rather lose money and do the venue that we're using now than do that place that we were at, because it really changes everything. You know, the prestige factor, the fact that you know what people perceived value and everything. So I definitely think that. Another point I want to make as far as vision versus reality, people keep this in mind. Far few people are going to show up than you expect.
Yeah.
And I'm talking even people that are like, oh my God, we should do something here. We should have a conference here in the Northwest. You know, wouldn't it be great if we had a conference? Oh, I would definitely go to a conference. And then, you know, you're talking to them. Are you going to be there? Oh no, I've got to clip my toenails that weekend. So, you know,
oh wait, it's going to cost me money.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. So keep that in mind, and don't do it for the money, because if you're doing it for the money,
you're
believe me,
you're SOL.
I think it really needs to be a calling. You need to be called to do this. There needs to be a very powerful feeling within that you need to be of service, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I just said to myself, man, we've got to get Michigan back on the map again. And that was my entire reason for that. And this year we have, I think, more people coming from Michigan than ever before, which is great.
Nice.
You know, we're finding them. And that was one of the big things. And then I know that you and Grant had that. You guys were just like, we've got to do something. Stage hypnosis is on the ropes. So, and maybe not they are, but you know what I mean? For dramatic effect. I knew that was a powerful vision for you. And Anthony was the same way. He was, you know what? The Northwest, we've got to get this back together. We've got to come together as a community and stop fighting each other. There's clients for all, per se.
There really is.
Yeah.
There really is.
So
there are far more people out there that need us than we could serve, you know?
Yeah.
We just have to let them know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So exactly. And the great thing about it is, you know, like each year it gets a little bit better. As far as people come, we always say, well, don't expect a huge amount of people. But each year as they go, people hear about it and they go about it and they're like, hey, let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there. It gets better and better and better. So, yes, go ahead, Anthony.
I want to point one thing out if you're thinking about putting something like this together. And I'm going to tell you this just in the simplest terms. You do not need a keynote speaker your first couple years. Do not spend the money on a keynote speaker. Because most of the time you're expecting a keynote. A keynote technically is supposed to put butts in seats. They're an attraction. People want to come and see them. Do your research. Make sure that you just do your research, because it can be a great thing. It can also add to the challenges of things as well. Because remember, you've got to pay a keynote speaker. You've got to pay for their room and their board. Most of the time, you got to pay for their transportation. Now, we really had a good last year, I've got to admit. Carl Smith jumped on board with us, and he was there. He was a great support throughout the thing. But Jim and I learned that because we were trying to create a regional thing, we need to stick more regional. And we needed to, it wasn't a mistake, but it was a learning point for us that we needed to stick with the Northwest, right? Carl did an amazing job. He was a great keynote speaker. Everybody loved him. But it was what we learned is that we didn't necessarily need it. And that's what we really thought was going to help drive a lot of sales. And it's not that he didn't drive some sales. We're not saying that, but it didn't generate what we thought it was going to generate, right? We were expecting, like you were saying, Dan, hundreds of people to show up. And that's just not quite the way it worked out. And we've got about the same amount of people this year with just Jim and I being the keynote speaker, right? And so we're learning as we're growing. So, if you're lucky like we are and you have someone who's willing to work with you, like Carl was willing to work with us, it's not a bad thing. But make sure you've got someone who's willing to work with you and is going to help you out.
Yeah, we have an amazing closing keynote speaker, just a great guy.
That's what I heard. Good thing.
I mean, let's go back to this where the keynote should get his travel expenses paid. That's a fascinating point, Anthony.
Thanks a lot, Anthony.
Well, you know what? Here's something to think about. Find somebody that's going to be there anyway.
Yeah.
Invite them to be the keynote because also, you have to remember too, like a lot of these things, like I oftentimes think, oh, we got to do more for, like the keynote or for the volunteers and stuff. But there is a certain amount of prestige that comes with being a keynote speaker at a hypnosis conference. So you don't necessarily, you definitely should pay the closing keynote speaker a lot of money because they're very important. But everybody else, they're getting a lot out of it too. They're getting a lot of value out of just being the speaker or the volunteer or whatever. So I think that's a great point as far as like, don't spend much money unnecessarily, because this is what we've learned is presenters aren't necessarily going to put butts in seats, right? Unless it's maybe with Terry Stokes. I think Terry Stokes probably for the Performing Hypnosis Summit that probably did, and maybe a couple more. But other than that, I just don't think that it really makes that big of a difference.
Right.
And I think you want people that are going to be, especially in those early years, you want people that are there to support, that are in your corner anyway. Right. Not necessarily the people. Once the event's been established 3 or 4 years, then start spending some money if you've got the budget to do so. But you want everybody involved in the organization, even the attendees, to all be pushing that ship in the same direction. So
And we lucked out that first year. And I'm just going to say that just because we didn't get the dates we wanted. And that's another thing, right? It's like dates. Do you get the dates you want? We didn't get the dates we wanted, but we wound up mistakenly by accident so close to Mid-America, the Mid-American Hypnosis Conference, which is great, that we inadvertently got a lot of international people. I know Grant came and he was heading to Mid-America, and Rob DeGroof was heading Mid-America. And they just kind of pit stopped at us to see what we were about, and they took off. And Grant's coming again this year. He's our closing keynote speaker. And we've also got a couple of those other international people coming from Canada and England. And it kind of grew again, vision versus reality. I just thought, put as much Michigan into it as you can. This is the Michigan Hypnosis Conference. And it grew. It expanded it to an area outside Michigan. And I'm not going to tell those people they can't come. I'm going to welcome, those folks to come in, because our goal is the future of hypnosis. But it expanded it, in a way that I wasn't ready for. Even though we're not huge, we're not gigantic, it was just a great thing. Just like, oh man, the support from the community was amazing. So, and again, we got that great support, except for the guy who got trapped in Dublin. But you got a cool movie poster out of it, though.
That is a cool movie poster.
But I joke. So yeah, and it became the same thing for, I know, the Pacific Northwest. You've got to deal with this guy coming in from Michigan all the time, and he's a little aloof. He's a little strange, but he's showing up. And just so, yeah, that's
he
a great
brings us projectors that he spends on his conference, so we don't have to spend on our conference. Dan, you are the best sponsor in the world.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I want to just mention too. So I don't want people to think that we in the Northwest, we don't want international speakers. We welcome you.
Absolutely.
It's just our advertising. See, here's the thing. So HypnoThoughts is everything to everyone. You're never gonna. Don't try to be. And like even NGH conference. I think at this point, if you're gonna start something, niche down. Get right as niche down as possible. So for us, we're Pacific Northwest. That's who we advertise to. For Performing Hypnosis Summit, we specifically will not accept any presenters that are presenting on hypnotherapy. We love hypnotherapy. We both do hypnotherapy. That's not what it's about, though. And so
Right.
we've had great speakers that have submitted, present proposals that we're doing hypnotherapy. We're like, no, we don't. Sorry, we don't want
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
You can come here, do it here, but we don't want you here at the.
So,
Because
yeah, because it is just that. And we kind of talked about that, and I'd say, oh no, it has to be that because I agreed with you. It has to be just for that stage hypnosis right there. As I got out of training, I think the last 2 weeks or so in the clinical hypnotherapy training, they had a stage hypnotist come in, and he worked with us, and it was Frank Guilford. I'm hoping I want to say his name right because he was one of the instructors, and he said, "Do stage hypnosis, you'll be a better hypnotist. Doesn't mean you're a better therapist. You'll be a much better hypnotist because confidence and
right.
gravitas
Oh
is
yeah.
there, and it's yeah, you know what I mean. It's so I'm thinking stage hypnosis, and it's hard too. It's much harder than people think it is. Having done it, and having people say, "Hey, can you set up in the dark?" No, I can't set up in the dark. I actually had that question asked at me at one of the high school shows was, "Can you set up in the dark?" I'm like, "Can you set up in the dark?" I'm like, so those are one of the things that we have there, and it becomes an issue. And then you go back to people, presenters. One of the things I always found, and I learned real quick, was sending out a presenter agreement, but getting it back signed
Good luck.
becomes a challenge.
With a
Um,
picture of the right size
Yeah.
yeah,
after
yeah.
you've given them the dimensions and everything.
So yeah,
A picture
exactly.
from within the last 20 years is also
Oh
beneficial.
boy, that would be nice. Wow.
That's not 1968
It's like
anymore.
catfish.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're not doing it. But yeah, and that is just one of the great things. And where was I think I wanted to bring one more thing up here. Before nope, I don't think I see it. So I won't bring it up. Because it's not there. So any closing thoughts as because we're coming up on an hour now, and I think this is the longest podcast I've done. Uh, so any closing thoughts on just event management and coordinating those events? Go ahead, Grant.
I think if you have a vague interest in organizing your own conference or event, I think the first thing you should do is go to all of the other conferences and events, and just really get a feel for it. Find out what you can do better, find out what you can do different, but also build those connections with those organizers because you'll get a lot further by giving support. You will gain support and you'll do a better job. Because the worst thing for us as organizers is not other people setting up other events, it's other people setting up shit events. Because that's what Mars people, and they kind of go, oh, I'm not going to do that because it was terrible. So if everybody works together, then it does a much better job. So if you're interested in setting up your own events, go and support other people's events first. You'll get an idea of the workload, what expectations are from you, and you'll decide whether it's something you want to do or not.
Right. And I agree with Grant. I mean, I volunteered at, excuse me, I volunteered at HypnoThoughts. I volunteered at NGH. I volunteered, I was a speaker at, and I've been a speaker at all of these as well. So I got to see, and I got to know Scott and Stephanie, right? Particularly Stephanie. And Stephanie's a real behind the scenes person for all that. And so she gave me so much, her and Scott, tons of information for Jim and I to go on. And I mean, there is mistakes that I made even after the fact with making. And here's where you got to be careful as an event person when you're working with these folks. I learned this from Scott, a really valuable lesson. What are you putting out there that may somehow reflect upon the other conferences in a way that you don't necessarily mean to be doing, and possibly even shedding some things that aren't that just don't support it in the way that it needs to be supported. And so you have to be cognizant of what is going on with these other organizations. When are they sending out their announcements, right? Because again, we're working together, we're being collaborative here, we're not working apart. And so you need to be cognizant of what they're doing as well. And you need to be respectful of those things, because I sent out some advertisements all about the same time that Scott had, last year, and it was like it didn't bode well for me, right? And it wasn't intentional, but I learned some valuable lessons. And so it's important to be aware of what the other people are doing and when they're doing it, and that's why it's important to be collaborative.
So yeah, absolutely. I know that that was one of the things that kind of spurred Heather's decision. Was I was going to the UK hypnosis conference and hypnothoughts, and I had presented at Heartland in Mid America, and she's watching me fly to all these places. And she goes, "Well, why are you doing that?" So, well, I'm supporting the conference, and they're supporting the office. If I go there, I present, and then that's branding for me, and so on and so forth. And she said, "Well, what would that look like if we had a conference here?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." So, we started putting it together, and I did have to completely redesign the website. Because that first website, I think, was just it was too much. It was too far out, um, reaching too far out to too many people. We had to shrink it back down to a closer website to Michigan, to make it more for us. Because again, you don't want to inadvertently harm someone else's conference. So that was one of the things. One of the corrections that we made very quickly for this year was like, let's make sure that it is, tight here, and that we're not um, doing that. So I don't even advertise. If I do a Facebook ad, I'm very careful about where I'm advertising. So there's nothing that goes out towards the West Coast, because that, to me, that belongs to Hypnothoughts. I mean, really out there. I don't even advertise out there. I don't advertise in the Pacific Northwest area. I don't advertise in the Chicago area, because, Heartland, it's just, right there in Michigan, into Ohio, and I think a little bit into New York, and that's it, because it's just that swath. And you have to be careful again, so that we don't get in the way of the NATH conference. And I was very mindful of, oh, if I put the schedule out, I've got to be last, because, Hypnothoughts is putting their schedule out. Not that we're going to bother Hypnothoughts, but, it's like they're putting their schedule out, and I know the Pacific Northwest is in June, and then, that's right there. So I need to put my schedule out last, so that I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, because we're in September. And that to me, seemed to make sense. I don't know what you guys think.
We wanted to be in October, but we learned quickly that that wasn't going to work.
Well, keep this in mind. So here's the thing that we learned was, so we are focused on the Northwest.
Right.
We're not focused on Florida or Alabama or Michigan, right?
Right.
However, with the advertising and with the timing of when you do it, other conferences, and we'll probably feel that way at some point too, may feel slighted, or they may feel like you are competing with them, or that you are going to take presenters, attendees away from theirs. Even though you're in even a different country. But I think it's also about the noise in social media, the noise on the internet. It gets a little bit confusing. So it does sort of make sense. Also, the other thing I wanted to, I want to say too,
Yeah.
it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
Anthony kind of touched on this before.
Yeah.
It's just the hotel. It's relationships within the community. So I would say start, even whether, I don't know why I started doing this. I started trying to go meet other hypnotists all the time 10 years ago. And it really laid this foundation for, I hate to use the term, but becoming an influencer, where you actually have some influence in the field, and people will want to come and hang out with you.
Yeah.
So be cool. That's the big thing as far as relationships. Be cool unto others, and they'll be cool to you. Mostly.
Yeah, exactly. I think I had that in the winter issue there, the article I wrote. And I said to myself, if I had the connections I have now 8 years ago,
Oh yeah.
I'd have been so much ahead of the game. Really. So yeah, but all right, guys, I want to thank you for kind of joining us here on the Hypnocafe podcast and magazine. We're going to go ahead and upload this video to the Facebook page. I'm not sure why it stopped, but we kept going. We're live on YouTube. So just keep moving, as Grant says. Don't give up. Keep going forward. And I want to thank my guests, Jim Kellner, Grant Saunders, Anthony Gitch. You guys should be impressed that I didn't switch everybody's names around, for joining us here today. And be sure to check out the Performing Hypnosis Summit, the Pacific Northwest Conference, and the Michigan Conference. So, yeah, you guys have a good day. And hey, as always, I will see you out there as I stop the recording.
Peace out.